every day, if you watch the news, you will see an impact of climate change happening, which is not necessarily being caused by climate change, but it's certainly being exacerbated by climate change. They're becoming worse. And the exacerbated impacts lead to losses and damages. People are losing lives, people are losing their homes, their agriculture, and that is a major cost, which in this context, UNFCCC, there is a responsibility for all countries, because all countries are polluters causing the problem. We all are responsible. And therefore, we all have a collective responsibility to come to their help, to their support. Right now, the victims of climate change are bearing the cost of climate change. This system here, the UNFCCC, has to come up with something to help them. A few countries have already stepped forward. That's very good. But we need a collective decision here in the next few days coming out of this process. But today's meeting is the other end of the spectrum, on the ground where people are suffering and people are having to deal with the problems. And we've got a collection of very interesting stories. My center, the International Center for Climate Change and Development, we run a network of universities in the least developed countries. These are 46 of the poorest countries in the world, most of them sub-Saharan Africa, where we are conducting studies at the national level on what are the losses and damages they're suffering, what are the possible ways they can deal with it, and where are the gaps that they need additional resources and additional support to deal with the practical side of the problem. Doesn't matter what negotiations happen here, they are the people suffering the impacts, and they are the ones that need support. And we are trying to provide that. And this event today here is a networking event of people who are doing things on the ground to support the communities who are suffering loss and damage, but not just as victims, but as people who are trying to do something about the problem. And I hope you'll find those interesting. Thank you very much, Charlotte.
Thank you so much. Okay. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to invite each of our speakers to the stage now. So first, I'd like to invite Nusrat Noshin from ICAD. She is the program coordinator for the Loss and Damage program at ICAD. Thank you. Then we have one speaker online who I think we're still trying to connect with. No. Okay, she's not there yet. So I'll introduce her when she arrives. Then if I could please welcome to the stage Juliet Nangamba from the Community Technology Development Trust in Lusaka, Zambia. Let's go to the stage. Thank you. And then I'd like to invite Angela Mendes from the Chico Mendes Committee to the floor. Please join us, Angela. And last, if I could invite Leanne da Costa Santos, who's a youth activist from Brazil, please to come to the stage too. Great. Okay. Interpretation is okay? Okay. Okay. Great. So I think first up, I'm going to hand over to Nusrat to take us through a presentation on gendered experiences of loss and damage.
Hello. Hi. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Nusrat Noshin. I am currently working as a program coordinator of the Loss and Damage program at the International Center for Climate Change and Development. We are based in Bangladesh, and we have actually concretized our loss and damage program quite recently, although we have been working on a number of projects over about 10 years or so. But this time around, we have opened a number of avenues on which we're working in the loss and damage arena. One of them is research, and one of the researches that we are focusing on at this point is the non-economic losses and damages. So as we know that losses and damages induced by human induced climate change, they are a reality now. It's a lived reality, and it's happening everywhere. For example, last month itself in Bangladesh, we experienced the cyclone called Cyclone Sitrang, where a lot of losses, actually loss of life is very less, has decreased a lot in Bangladesh because of its excellent early warning systems and anticipatory preparations and everything. But despite that, a lot of damages happen, and they are difficult to adapt to, and they're often, since we're a vulnerable country and we're a developing country, we don't have the resources to cope up with it at the scale at which it is needed. So what happened, so the main portion of the losses and damages that we normally see are the economic aspects of it. But there are a whole spectrum of losses and damages that is often hard to quantify, and it is difficult to brought into, and it is often ignored by a lot of people, and those are the non-economic losses and damages. So from our center, we are currently trying to do a research in the southern part of Bangladesh in two regions. One is called Buri Goaleni, and the other is Gabura region. There we're conducting a study where we're working on mainly gendered aspects of non-economic losses and damages. And the findings that we had in the initial phase of that research is very interesting. Some of the things some of the things are generic, which we already know, and some were quite interesting, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So we took about, I think, 16 KIIs and about 4 or 5 FGDs, and we spoke to a number of community members and how they perceive losses and damages, especially the non-economic aspects of it, which cannot be quantified. So, for example, those regions, the coastal areas of Bangladesh, they're often, the main issues they face are cyclones, storm surges, salinity intrusion, for which they face longer lasting impacts than the immediate rehabilitation phase. So due to the salinity intrusion, they face a lot of physical impacts. For example, they have loss of hair, for which they often resolve to putting henna to restore their hair and the health of their hair. Then they have a darker pigmentation due to increased use of or exposure to saline water. They're using to bathe in saline water, which causes increased pigmentation, which often causes problem with their skin. Then especially girls and women, they often have to face lots of problems. They face a lot of gynecological issues because of increased use of saline water, especially during their menstrual cycles. That affects their health immensely. And then apart from that, there are also some very interesting impacts. For example, a lot of the people in those disaster-prone areas, they often end up not finding suitable partners because people from other villages or other regions, they don't want to marry their daughter off to a disaster-prone area. So that was also a very interesting finding that we encountered. So they often resolve to going to other villages or move because of that issue. And then there are also, due to the increased sea levels and the saline water intrusion, the soil is often damaged. The fertility of those soil does not affect growth of flower plants or trees, and a lot of religious customs are use flowers. For example, the Hindu community of those villages, they have this religious festival called Puja, and they use a lot of flowers in those. But due to the salinity intrusion, those lands are now incapable of producing flowers. So that affects their religious traditions and customs. And then in the Muslim community, they have Eid ul-Adha, for example, and they normally give sacrifice of cows or livestock, but due to the cyclones or any kind of immediate disasters, those livestock are often lost during those disasters. So these are some impacts, non-economic impacts that happen in the religious customs phase. And then, of course, there's the generic ones, like there is, during a cyclone or a rehabilitation phase, often schooling is missed. There is lack of mobility because the roads are damaged, the infrastructure is, affected. So because of these, these are some of the impacts that normally we don't think of. These are some of the impacts that happen at the back end of it. These are, because when a disaster strikes, normally they're not the media doesn't focus on, what happens to the people, the children who are not going to school, their future, how they're delayed, or also if someone can find a partner. So, these are some of the impacts that happens, and it actually, because of the perpetual nature of it, the perpetual nature of the disasters that keep on happening, often this has, mental stress. People of those communities, because the minute they start coping with something, and then another disaster strikes or another thing happens, so that the perpetual nature of the disasters or the impact that affects them mentally, and so mental health is definitely severely affected. So some of the recommendations are from this study are that more study should be done to be able to identify the gaps in the non-economic losses and how we could possibly quantify, because again, that is something very difficult to do. And of course, the main and the most important thing is finance for loss and damage that are happening. But again, the gap remains that how to quantify and how to finance these impacts. So this is something that we collectively need to work on, and we collectively need to recognize and identify that these are the gaps, and we should move forward and press forward with it. So that's all from me. So we're doing the second phase of the study after COP. So hopefully, and the first phase of that study has been published, and the IIED and the ECAD websites, because it's a joint collaboration research project. So if you're interested, please go to the website and you can have access to it. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nusrat. I think it's really, as Salim Haq said, loss and damage has been such a big topic here in the negotiations, discussing how much we should need to cover it, but how do we even begin to quantify impacts on mental health, and cultural and religious impacts. Thank you. I think next we were going to have Joan from the Samdana Institute speak to us, but unfortunately she hasn't been able to connect online yet. So if she does connect later, hopefully we can come back and hear from her. That would be wonderful. But in the meantime then, we are going to be sharing a video from the Voices for Just Climate Action project, which is taking place in 7 countries, but this video is from Brazil, where we have curated a story from Rogério Mendes, who is a rubber tapper in the Amazon. So that will be up next. Just before we do, I'd just like to give one more reminder to everybody in the audience. We will be having interpretation into Portuguese and English. So if you don't speak both languages, please use the QR code above there to download the app and use some earphones so that you can follow along for our next speakers. Okay, thank you.
A Amazônia hoje está em risco. A gente já começa a sentir o calor, o ar da gente mudar. O rio já está mais seco, as árvores estão morrendo mais cedo também. Com essa mudança climática já diminuiu a produção da gente aqui dentro da floresta. A gente quebrava 400 lados de castanha. Hoje na minha área eu estou conseguindo quebrar 200 lados de castanha, 250 lados de castanha. Então é muito importante a gente manter a floresta em pé. É mais questão da gente continuar aqui na Terra. A gente poder viver bem e com saúde, né? O meu pai, junto com o Chico Mendes, lutaram pela defesa da Amazônia. Então agora é a nossa vez. Hoje eu mostro a minha vida através da rede social para inspirar outros jovens a viver o que eu vivo e ser feliz como eu sou aqui dentro da minha área. Hoje a gente que vive dentro da floresta é muito importante para as mudanças climáticas, porque a gente está aqui dentro e somos os guardiões da floresta. A gente faz um apelo para que as políticas públicas estejam mais voltadas para a gente. O cuidado que a gente tem aqui com a nossa floresta, a gente está cuidando para o mundo inteiro também. Venho aqui fazer um apelo para que os governos ouçam a gente, pois temos ideias para adiar o fim dos recursos naturais que temos. Aproveitando o momento, convido outros jovens como eu a se juntar ao movimento das mudanças climáticas, pois precisamos resolver essa situação o mais rápido possível, para que a gente tenhamos futuro e as outras gerações tenham vida neste planeta.
Okay, so today we are really privileged to have two speakers from Brazil with us today. I think I'm going to hand over to, hold on just 1 second, is it working? No. Maybe give it a second for them to catch up. Now? Okay, good. So, I'm going to hand over first to to Angela Mendes to share with us some experiences from the Chico Mendes Extractivist Reserve. Angela is the chair of the Chico Mendes committee. And now, yes, over to you, Angela.
Olá. Bom dia para todos, todas e todos. É um prazer muito grande estar aqui com vocês para falar da nossa experiência, né? Eu começo recebendo já essa energia, né, da floresta amazônica brasileira que vem até nós. Tá acompanhando a tradução? Tá acompanhando. Bom, tudo começou, né, numa luta dos... com licença. Bom, tudo começou com a luta do meu pai, Chico Mendes, seus companheiros, na década de 80, para que se conseguisse um território específico para as populações extrativistas florestais que estavam sofrendo violentamente o conflito e expulsão das suas terras na floresta, dos seus territórios, da floresta, lugar aonde eles viviam e aprenderam com os povos originários locais a sobreviver, a conhecer e a estabelecer uma relação com esses locais, com esse local, com a floresta, porque eram populações que vinham de outra região. Em seguida, também veio de outra região, que era uma região de criação, tradicionalmente de criação de gado, né? Uma migração dessa população para a floresta, através de uma grande campanha do governo federal que dizia que a Amazônia brasileira era um vazio demográfico que não tinha ninguém, desconsiderando que lá já estavam os povos originários e que mais povos de outras regiões chegaram para ajudar a trabalhar, a manejar a borracha, o látex naquele lugar, naquela floresta. Mas o governo militar brasileiro da época disse que não tinha ninguém na Amazônia. E aí chamou, né, grandes pecuaristas de outra região do Brasil para ocupar a Amazônia, para desmatar a Amazônia, gerando um grande conflito, gerando violência, expulsão, morte das pessoas que já estavam lá. Chico, então, pensando numa grande aliança com esses povos originários que já estavam, né, idealizou a Aliança dos Povos da Floresta para lutar pela conquista de territórios, territórios demarcados para povos originários, territórios criados para populações extrativistas florestais que extraíam látex, que colhiam a castanha e que manejavam outros produtos da floresta para sua subsistência. Essa relação de aliança deu vida a uma forma de território para essas populações tradicionais florestais, que foram as reservas extrativistas florestais. Os indígenas já tinham seus territórios, né, garantidos por lei, a lei brasileira, um estatuto brasileiro que lhes dava o direito a seus territórios, né, aqueles que tinham sido reconhecidos até aquela época, mas essas outras populações que estavam na floresta também, né, somando uma grande força de proteção desse território, de proteção, né, da floresta, dos seus recursos naturais, eles não tinham essa garantia, eles continuavam sendo mortos. E aí nasceram as reservas extrativistas florestais nesse contexto, né, de uma aliança política por essa conquista que foi tão cara que custou a vida do meu próprio pai. Mas essas reservas extrativistas são super importantes, tão importantes que hoje no Brasil nós temos cerca de 80 reservas extrativistas geradas pelo governo federal e pelos governos locais, né, em toda a Amazônia. O problema é que essas reservas extrativistas elas foram criadas, mas elas precisam ser mantidas, né? E, logicamente, com tudo que se proporcionou de política pública em governos passados, ainda se havia muito a fazer. Mas, no atual governo, logicamente, a gente teve um grande desmonte de todas as políticas de proteção da floresta, de proteção do território, de proteção da vida dessas pessoas. E a gente entendeu que nós precisávamos ter, o Comitê Chico Mendes precisava ter uma incidência muito forte dentro do território, se a gente quisesse que o legado daquele, né, que deu a vida por eles, pudesse ser mantido. E a gente acha que a juventude é uma das soluções. E a gente passou a trabalhar para apoiar a capacidade, a desenvolver a capacidade dessas juventudes para fazer a defesa desses territórios, para fazer a defesa das suas culturas, para fazer a defesa das suas identidades. E, assim, a gente criou um programa que chama Jovens Protagonistas da Reserva Extrativista Chico Mendes, que é o território que leva o nome do meu pai. Esse projeto a gente começou em 2016. Né? O Rogério, ele participou do nosso projeto, é uma jovem liderança hoje, com uma grande capacidade de comunicação, né? Consegue lidar com as tecnologias, mesmo com toda a dificuldade de inclusão digital e também né, geográficas dos territórios que estão da floresta, que é um lugar onde se carece de muita infraestrutura, principalmente de comunicação. Bom, o projeto dos Jovens Protagonistas, ele trabalhou com 30 jovens dentro dessa Resex, né, nessa tentativa de despertar essas capacidades crítica, política, né, principalmente, entendendo que eles são a base desses territórios, mas não só por isso, porque o meu pai também, ele tinha uma visão muito antecipatória, e ele deixou uma carta aos jovens dessa geração, né, aos jovens que, quando ele escreveu, eram jovens do futuro, em que ele chama os jovens dessa geração para uma revolução socialista. E ficamos muito felizes porque, inclusive aqui na COP, a gente vê a grande movimentação que os jovens estão fazendo. Pois bem, nesse trabalho com juventude, a gente acabou também, com o apoio do WWF Brasil, aprovando um projeto para que a gente possa ter mais capacidade de atuação dentro desse território, que é o Vozes pela Ação Climática. Então, a gente continua acreditando que é a juventude, né, que pode também ser e que deve ser uma dessas soluções, quando levanta a potência da sua voz, como o Rogério faz, em defesa da sua cultura, em defesa do seu território. Porque as reservas extrativistas, elas têm uma força, um poder muito grande, assim como os territórios indígenas, de frear, né, o desmatamento e de contribuir para o controle, para a mitigação dessa crise climática. Porque são terras de propriedade da União, mas são de usufruto dessa população, que tem uma relação também muito forte com esse território de proteção. No entanto, estão cercadas de fazendas de gado. Quer dizer, a Resex está cercada de fazenda de gado por todos os lados, assediando essa juventude e assediando os próprios moradores, né, tentando tomar seus territórios. Então, se a gente não age em algum momento também, né, levando formação, levando informação, sobretudo, e inclusão, a gente torna esse trabalho muito mais fácil. O projeto VAC vem nos dar mais uma força para que a gente possa trabalhar com mais estrutura, com mais organização lá dentro do território, né, com comunicação, entendendo a comunicação um elemento hoje fundamental para que essa juventude tanto tenha um instrumento, né, que lhes permita acessar informação boa, bons conteúdos, mas que também eles próprios passem a criar seus próprios conteúdos, né? A internet como um instrumento de conhecimento, na medida em que esses jovens que estão no território, eles estão tendo um número muito grande de evasão, de saída dos seus territórios, em busca também até de um nível superior de escola, porque lá nas reservas eles têm ensino médio, mas eles querem estudar mais, eles querem adquirir mais conhecimentos, voltar para os seus territórios e contribuir, né, com esses conhecimentos que eles adquiriram. Então, nisso também há uma possibilidade muito grande de desenvolver plataformas de ensino, né, voltada especificamente para esse povo, porque é um problema grande, né? A educação formal não inclui as populações tradicionais, elas ficam, né, à margem e aprendendo coisas que nada têm a ver com suas realidades. Então, a gente entende que a inclusão digital, né, a comunicação, ela é imprescindível para que esses jovens se reconectem com seus territórios. E é nisso que o Vozes pela Ação Climática Justa nos diz e nos mostra, porque essa é uma população, né, que está ali recebendo, por mais que contribua com a mitigação ou com o enfrentamento, né, ao desmatamento, que a sua floresta em pé, elas contribuam com a redução dos gases do efeito estufa. A gente precisa ainda entender que é a população também que mais sofre, né, injustiça, porque também é a que mais cuida, que mais protege, mas é a que mais impactada, né? O sul global, ele é o mais impactado pela emissão do norte global. Então, a gente sabe que são muitos os problemas, as soluções, elas também precisam ser muitas, entendendo cada contexto, cada realidade, né? Para o território específico que a gente está falando, de área protegida, na modalidade reserva extrativista, que hoje ajuda a proteger mais de 50 milhões de hectares da floresta, a gente acredita muito que essa também é uma ação muito forte, muito potente, ajudar a mobilizar a juventude, aquela juventude que está lá, né, que às vezes está sendo assediada pelo gado, mas que também está sendo assediada pelas facções criminosas, que hoje também estão entrando nos territórios, assediando essa juventude, né? E entendendo juventude, entendendo comunicação, formação política, inclusive, para entender a luta que foi para criar esses territórios e o compromisso deles para manter essa luta, né? Então, a gente trabalha nessa... Só para dizer que o Comitê Chico Mendes realiza todo ano a Semana Chico Mendes, desde 1889, né? E a Semana Chico Mendes desse ano, o nosso tema é Aliança de Gerações pela Floresta em Pé, porque a gente acredita muito na juventude, mas a gente acredita muito na história e na luta de quem veio antes, e a gente acredita muito que o jovem e essa geração que ajudou a construir, elas são partes fortes nessas soluções. Agradeço.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Angela. I think that's really powerful. And actually, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Leon da Costa Santos, who is a youth activist, a mobilizer, and a trainer in the Chico Mendes area. Just give us one moment while the interpretation catches up. It's okay? Okay, over to you, Leon.
Primeiramente, bom dia a todos. Quero dizer que é um grande prazer estar aqui nesse momento, representando a juventude da área rural do município de Brasileia, representando todos os jovens associados do sindicato ao qual represento, que é o Sindicato dos Trabalhadores Rurais de Brasileia, ao qual também Chico Mendes foi um dos primeiros secretários, o Wilson Pinheiro, que também é um ativista que lutou nos primeiros empates com direito à terra, é um dos nossos representantes. Então, nesse momento, eu quero agradecer a todos os ativistas, todos os que lutaram no passado e aos que estão vindo também agora. No município de Brasileia, a gente tem um grande território da reserva Chico Mendes, onde o sindicato atua bastante, devido que é um território grande e tem muitas pessoas que moram nesse território. A gente trabalha, o sindicato atua como mobilizador dessas pessoas, também legalizando elas para que possam ter acesso às políticas públicas, lutando pelos seus direitos, que é o direito à terra, direito ao preço justo dos produtos. E a gente trabalha em parceria com todas as outras organizações, que são as associações, os núcleos de base. O Comitê Chico Mendes também é um grande apoiador nosso. E, assim, o nosso trabalho com a juventude, ele é muito importante, porque você estando num local de área rural, que nem Brasileia, que é um local distante. Quem mora na área rural de Brasileia, tem gente que mora muito distante, e então você passa por algumas situações, que, por exemplo, é muito importante a gente ver esse vídeo do Rogério, mostrando como que é a vida, a importância disso, porque até um dia desses a gente era quem usavam o termo de seringueiro como pejorativo, como preconceito. Então, hoje, é muito importante ver um jovem extrativista fazendo vídeos, fazendo reels para as redes sociais, e onde ele tem um alcance muito grande, muito bom. Isso é muito importante, que nos dá visibilidade. A gente também tem que, voltando para o tema do painel, que é soluções para as localidades, uma coisa assim que é muito importante a gente ver que tem que dar mais... Como é que eu posso falar a palavra? Tem que valorizar também o trabalho de quem vive na área rural, de quem vive nas reseques, de quem protege as florestas, porque a gente trabalha com produtos que são por épocas. Borracha, castanha, às vezes arroz, às vezes copaíba. E a gente, nesse governo que está tendo desde 2018, a gente teve um prejuízo muito grande. Governo Dilma, a gente conseguia vender a nossa castanha de até R$100 a lata. Esse ano, a gente vendeu a castanha de R$25 a lata. Então, isso tem um impacto muito grande na nossa economia, né? E você imagina esse impacto voltado para quem é jovem e para quem é mulher. Porque a gente que é jovem e é mulher, principalmente da área extrativista, não se tem muitos direitos econômicos. Porque a maioria da nossa renda é toda passada pelo homem da casa. Ou seja, a mulher e o jovem, o filho do extrativista, eles não acessam aquela economia. E quando ela está diminuída, que nem está agora, bem diminuída, então isso nos afeta muito mais. Então, perdemos a nossa qualidade de vida. Então, quando recebemos apoios, igual esse do VAC, para dar voz às mulheres e à juventude, isso nos deixa muito animados e revigorados para continuar na luta, né? E é isso. Tem mais alguma coisa? Tá bom.
It's good. Great. Thank you so much, Lan. I think it's really important when we talk about the local level challenges and solutions that we have solutions, but also some ways that can support those solutions through connectivity, I think you mentioned, and also to have a supportive government that can enable those solutions at the local level. I think it will catch up. So I think next we will be hearing from Tunisia. We will be showing a short video from Tunisia, from one of our local partners, also part of the Voices for Just Climate Action program.
وحدة شنني هذه حباها الله بموقع ممتاز وفريد من نوعه. كي نقولوا مميز من ناحية المناخ، من ناحية التربة اللي هي تكون موجودة على حافة البحر الأبيض المتوسط وتمتد إلى الصحراء. لكن اليوم نحب نتحدث على الاستنزاف العشوائي للمياه من طرف الوحدات الكيميائية ومعمل الإسمنت اللي ضرنا بصفة كبيرة وملحوظة، ومن حقنا باش نلقي صيحة فزع للمشاكل اللي موجودة جراء هذوما الغولة الزوز. زيد الخوف متاعنا تو من التغيرات المناخية اللي عشناها وشفنا مشاكلها نوعا ما، لكن فما مشاكل قاعدة باش تجينا غدوة الحي. للأمانة احنا في غني عنها في الواح، اللي هي تغيرات المناخية تسبب لنا إذا استفحل الأمر وبقت الحالة على ما هي عليه غدوة الحي حتى المنتوجات الشتوية ما عادش نجموا ننجوها، وبهذا مهددين حتى في أمننا الغذائي. الحوايج اللي نجموا نعركوا بها المشاكل اللي جايه هذه تغيرات مناخيه والا جفاف والواحد هو التعويل على بذورنا الاصليه والرجوع للبذور الاصليه، على خاطر حبينا ولا كرهنا الفلاح كان متسبب حتى هو في استعماله للمهجن في تفقير التربه بتاعها وفي مسانه مباشره او غير مباشره في صحه المواطن. ارتأينا مجموعه من الفلاحين في المساهمة في حل بعض المشاكل هذه، أن نكون جمعية يكون من أهدافها الأساسية هو كيفية الاستخراج البذور الأصيلة، تحسين البذور هذه والمحافظة عليها وتوريثها للأجيال القادمة اللي في الآخر حبينا ولا كرهنا. هي صمام أمان لتواجدنا، صمام أمان الأمن الغذائي، صمام أمان سيادتنا الغذائية، وفي الآخر هي الهوية متاعنا وهي مستقبل أجيالنا وتواجدنا.
Thank you. Thanks. Great. So we don't have a speaker from Tunisia with us here today, but I will hand over to Juliet in just a second, who will also be speaking about farmer-led seed systems. But something that struck me while listening to the video again is how important intergenerational knowledge is in shaping our locally led solutions. I know that's something Angela and Leanne also mentioned, and that often we do have those solutions at the local level, and there needs to be both a transfer of knowledge and a kind of handing over and capacity from one generation to the next. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Juliet Nangamba, who is based in Zambia with the Community Technology Development Trust.
Should I come and sit there so I can see my slides properly? Maybe I'll stand here. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, my name's Juliet Nangamba. I work with the Community Technology Development Trust in Zambia, and we are a member and partner to the VCA, Voices for Just Climate Action, and we're implementing a project in Rufunsa district where we promote local-aid solutions for climate adaptation. So I'll share a little bit of the work that we're doing in Zambia as CTDT, which feeds into the VCA project. And this is more focused on the seed and food systems. We've seen that also here the talk around agriculture systems and food system is not very prominent, still being under negotiation, but one of the things that is really impacted when it comes to climate change, really it's the food system which is building the resilience of the communities. And if we don't address this issue quickly, then we are really at risk of losing many lives, especially in Zambia. We've also seen that just last year, 34% of our agricultural production went down because of the impacts of climate change. Can I go to the next slide? So we are saying that if we are failing on seed, then we fail on food, and we fail to meet the basic human rights for people's livelihoods and people to survive. So our experience in Zambia is that we have seen, with climate change, we have seen excessive high temperatures, prolonged dry spells, floods, destruction of community infrastructure, breakout of new pests and diseases. Obviously, we are all familiar to these changes that have happened, but most of it also the loss of agrobiodiversity, which is very important for food and nutrition security. And also, if this is not addressed, then it leads to the loss of life, because we start talking about malnutrition and nutrition and everything else. So above all this, the climate crisis then intersects with many other issues around gender inequality, in inequitable food and seed system. The power distribution also becomes an issue. Hence, this expands the vulnerability of most communities that we work with. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so why are we focusing on farmer-led seed systems? Because we are seeing that if we focus on the farmer-led seed systems, it helps community to adapt to climate change. We strengthen the participation of farmers as key stakeholders in the decision-making process. We are also breeding for resilience. And what we have seen in our country is that our seed system is captured. It's controlled by corporates. So corporates have got their own interests. They're breeding for their own kind of traits that they are looking for, but they're not breeding for resilience. So we've seen that if we start doing work around seed systems from the grassroots, then we'll be addressing those issues that are really affecting the communities. So we see that when we do this work and support farmer-managed seed systems, then we enhance ownership of who owns the seed and also support food sovereignty of communities, enhance community cohesion and collective ownerships of germplasm. So we also want to conserve the biodiversity, agrobiodiversity. We saw in the previous video, if we are losing this biodiversity, we won't be able to conserve seed for future generations or address our own food sovereignty. Then we always leave the control of food systems, seed systems in the hands of corporates. We also want to promote farmer participation in decision making. So what are we doing at grassroots as a VCA, as a Zambia project, as an organization that implements this? So we do a lot of capacity building, really making people understand and take ownership of their food systems, their seed systems, so that they're able to address their challenges. We do a lot of analysis of what are the crops that are in our areas, what has changed, how has climate change impacted these crops. Then we do also a lot of breeding for new varieties. Our climate is changing very quickly and not giving enough time for crops to adapt. So we need to also move very fast and develop initiatives that allow communities to develop varieties that are adapting to the changes. And then we disseminate these materials that we have either developed or have repatriated from the community seed banks. So we also do a lot of collaborative work with community seed banks so that we are also bringing back that material that is sitting in the community seed banks and taking it back to the community so that it's being used by the communities and adapting to the changing climate. So just to show some of the work that we're doing in promoting the seed systems, we are restoring varieties. Quick. So here we do a lot of introduction of new materials in the communities through breeding processes like participatory variety selection. We also develop new varieties that should adapt to local conditions where those communities are living through participatory variety development. So we've seen that we also need to address incomes of communities. It doesn't make sense to talk about farmer-led seed systems if you not bring income to the communities for resilient building. So we want to address issues around affordability because the current food system that is pushed is ensuring that cost of seed is very high, and some communities are not able to access seed because of this. The seed can be available, but if it's very costly, then it won't be available to you because you can't buy it. So to do this, when we do the seed production, when we do the plant breeding, promote the farmer-led seed systems, we also make sure that we are multiplying the seed, making it available and accessible to the communities that have been impacted so that they're able to promote their food and nutrition security at household level. Yeah. So in all this, we also have community seed banks because if we're not conserving the seed, then we won't have seed for the next generation or for the future planting season. So we have put up community seed banks where farmers bring in, save their seed, access seed so that they have seed readily available for them. Just when there's a disaster, there's always somewhere that they go back to find seed. But obviously, like the experience last season was that we had a very heavy downfall storms. One of our seed banks was very damaged, so it took some time to rebuild and to bring back the structure to what it was. Yeah, so we also work now with 1,863 farmers But we take all these initiatives to wider communities, so we promote a lot of field days, community seed fair, we do a lot of radio program for sensitization, we hold community meetings so that farmers are part and parcel of all these activities that we are talking about and not just a few beneficiaries of the project. But we also face challenges when we're implementing this work. Obviously now, at the COP discussion, the issues around agriculture are still very slow. Not so much funding is coming to these such programs. And then we also note that what we are promoting is really led by the local people who are in those communities, but there isn't so much support for knowledge systems that are indigenous or that promote indigenous knowledge. So it's difficult for communities to adapt sometimes because the system itself does not support what they know and what works for them. Yeah, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the short presentation.
Great, thank you so much, Juliet. I've had the privilege of hearing Juliet speak before, actually, and one of the things that struck me about participatory plant breeding is that it is one way to combine, I suppose, local knowledge with external expertise of plant breeders, but it's also a really important way to recognize the expertise and knowledge that farmers have as they do their own research, and that is a form of science. And if recognizing the importance of that and how our own food systems rely on that going forward if they weather the impacts of climate change. So thank you. One other thing I think that struck me, Juliet, about your talk is that you mentioned it, I think the videos from Tunisia mentioned it, and Angela and Leanne mentioned it, is that very often our locally led solutions are challenging deep vested interests from big corporates. And that makes it dangerous and risky, but also very, very important that we join together in making those solutions happen. So I'd just like to thank our panelists from today for speaking with us here to share that message at COP in such an important space. I think we have time maybe for one question before we close. Okay, good. Is there, I think that is a question there. Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for a great panel and great insights. My question goes to the colleague from Zambia. I'm interested to know, does the national legislation and the international legislation support the local farmer-led breeding programs? And what are you facing in terms of resistance given the agro industry you mentioned? Thank you. And sorry, maybe I should say I'm Henrik Brandin, Director of Swedbio in Sweden. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so we have international frameworks that support, farmer-led seed systems. We have the International Treaty for Plant Genetic Resources. So I think this year's focus at the GB9 was how to really promote farmers' rights and having it enshrined. They've proposed categories of how this can be done, especially when it comes to national policies and how it can be really recognized as law. So those discussions have been ongoing. We hope to see a lot of progress at that level. We also have the UN drop. I think someone was doing a presentation this morning around UN drop, UN drip, that really gives the declarations for peasants' rights. But the trouble is that, yes, there is legislation at the international framework. When it comes to national frameworks, then it becomes a challenge because the national frameworks really only support what corporate institutions want to promote. It's very blind to the actual real situations of marginalized communities and what their seed or food systems look like. They only speak to corporate interests and not what are the needs of the local people. So that has been the problem and the challenge. So we hope that maybe we've been engaging national governments on how we can, overcome, include some supportive, progressive legislation framework in our national policies. Yeah, but it's a challenge and it's a struggle, and we hope we'll make progress. Yeah.
Thank you, Juliet. Sorry, I think we're just struggling with the interpretation not coming through. But in the interest of time, I think we have to close. So I'm going to invite the director of the Voices for Just Climate Action Program, Tandiwe Chikoma, to just say a few words to close. Thank you. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Charlotte, and thank you very much, everyone, for making time to come and listen to us as the Voices for Just Climate Action Alliance. It is a pleasure to have you here. I think we've already heard it. We have already heard all the critical issues from all the people that are represented here. The fact of the matter is that global warming and its impacts are really causing havoc, especially to communities that are actually in the global south. And having said that, we do appreciate, as an alliance, we do appreciate that the agenda of loss and damage has actually been put on the agenda of COP27. However, we are actually imploring all national parties to actually hear the voices of these communities that are affected, to make sure that we do have mechanisms that will ensure financing for all the loss and damage that is actually being incurred. I think we've also heard as well that the losses and damages that are being incurred are not just economic. There are also non-economic needs as well. And even with regards to matters of environmental assessments, we actually need to go beyond that and to make sure that we actually conduct needs assessments that will actually identify the challenges that the local communities are having as a result of climate change. And having said that, I think we've heard all of them calling for more climate finance, because the little and the smaller initiatives that they are doing, they could actually be more amplified, scaled up with more financing. So with that, I would like to stop here and to sincerely thank all the organizations that have partnered with VCA, SSN, and also to our lovely speakers. So thank you very much, and everyone for coming. Thank you so much.